Carol Vorderman on LBC yesterday talked about the nonsense of Liz Truss's resignation honours and the three people that she's thrust into the House of Lords, Monaghan, Matthew Elliott, and some other non-entity, can't remember the name now. She said they're called, what is it? Well, she said lieutenants of leave. That's it, lieutenants of leave. And she said rather more likely to be described as Titanics, as captains of the Titanic, or emissaries of the captain of the Titanic. I prefer not to think of Liz Truss as the captain of the Titanic hitting the iceberg. I prefer to think of her as the person practicing for shaking the ice in a cocktail. Liz Truss, the cocktail shaker. But Carol Vorderman was very entertaining yesterday. She started off by talking about Tony, the 9-year-old lad who she had met on the Pride of Britain Awards, who's now been given a New Year's honour. Well done. But on the other hand, at the other end of the scale, the politicians who've been knighted, the resignation honours, and she particularly focused on Liz Truss's 11 gongs, with 3 in the House of Lords. That means there's now 785 members of the House of Lords. And I personally think the House of Lords is a good thing. It's one of the few places, well, it is the only place in the parliamentary estate where you can hear a decent speech, where you can hear a decent debate, without it being drowned out by nonsense, and without it being simply a rehash of slogans. The standard of the House of Commons discourse is appalling. You only have to look at parliamentary questions, at Prime Minister's questions on a Wednesday, to see that one person asks another person a question, and what comes back is a slogan. Even the questions are slogans. Everybody's looking for a soundbite to secure their place at the next election, in Parliament rather than out of Parliament, and nobody's really interested in answering somebody else or dealing with what somebody else has said. As far as they're concerned, the articulation of the words in the parliamentary chamber is enough. They've done enough. They don't have to answer the question. They just have to deliver the soundbite. And that's where we've got to in our in our parliamentary discourse. That's where that's the position we're at. Parliament is no longer functioning. It's just simply a place for delivering sound bites. And as such, what's its point? Because the decisions are taken outside Parliament. And it doesn't matter how much the Speaker of the House of Commons may rail against it. That is the reality. So you look around Parliament to see where is there something interesting. The committee rooms are quite interesting, though often people have now got into the habit of saying, well, I don't have that information, I'll write to you. But the House of Lords is actually functioning. The one bit that there is a debate about removing is the one bit of Parliament that is actually working. It's extraordinary, quite extraordinary. And Carol Vorderman did a bit of maths on air. She pointed out that Liz Truss, with all her hand exercises, had cost us £30 billion in just over a month, 49 days. 49 days, 11 gongs. That works out at £3 billion per gong, per title. Simply astonishing. And then, of course, there's Charlotte Owen, the special advisor, the SPAD, the SPAD. Why is she there? Tim Martin, I know GB News and Talk TV opine resolutely about the wonders of Tim Martin. Every time I've gone into a Wetherspoons, and I don't go into such places very often, I had to go into Wetherspoons while I was doing Panto last year, and I found it sort of dirty and slightly unpleasant and very difficult to negotiate. I didn't know quite what I was supposed to do. But there is this thing, you have to go up to the bar and order your food and then go and sit down at a prescribed table. You select your table for... It's a nightmare! Nightmare! And I didn't enjoy it at all. So I had to discover Wetherspoons in Epsom and Wetherspoons in Exeter, and both were a misery. Oh, never again. But Tim Martin, I don't I don't sneer at his honour. Perfectly reasonable. He's done some work, and whether he approves of Brexit or not, the point is, when we go back to Brexit, in the 1970s, when we joined the common market, most people didn't want to join it. In 2016, when we left the common market, when we left Europe, it was a different matter. It was sort of knife-edge territory, and so public mood changes. You can't define your legislation, I think, on a plebiscite, on a referendum, or if you do, you have to hold one regularly, because people change their mind. So have another referendum if you want. Certainly, that's Scotland's point of view, isn't it?